Hi there, everyone. Art Burns here. Hope you're all having a great day today. I welcome you to my podcast and to my YouTube channel, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. And I really do hope that you're having a good day. I hope that you're finding happiness and fulfillment and satisfaction and wellness in your day. And if there's some reason that you're not feeling one or any of those things, or a few of those things, then I invite you to take a look and see how you're meeting the day. Are you meeting the day with a level of presence? Meaning really attending to each moment and each unfolding experience as it's happening? Are you accepting what is happening to you, at least just for now? Not that you're resigning yourself to it, but accepting that this is the as-isness of your experience right now. And are you leading yourself with a level of compassion, with a kindness for others, with an understanding that everyone out there, no matter what they're doing that might be, bothering you or hurting you or disturbing you in some way, that they're just acting in a way that they feel that they need to act. They're just trying to be happy, just like you are. And then I hope that you're able to apply a little curiosity to the experience that you're having. Because if you can do these things, right, if you check in with yourself anytime that you're feeling like you're not happy in any given moment, generally speaking, it's going to be because of external events, right? It's going to be the traffic jam this morning on your way to work. It's going to be an argument that maybe you had with your spouse or significant other. Maybe it's some difficulty that you had with your children this morning or last night or both. And these external experiences are what are going to make you feel that you're not happy. But happiness, you see, comes from inside, right? Happiness is our natural state, right? Believe it or not. And sometimes it's really hard to believe. And the way that we can cultivate and to get in touch with that inner state of happiness is simply by being present with what's happening as it's happening, by accepting what it is that is happening as it's happening. Right? As we attend to it, as we give our attention and our awareness to the things that are happening as they're happening, are we accepting them, or are we pushing them away, or are we clinging to things? What do we, that is a big part of why we feel happy or not happy. And again, the compassion. Are we allowing compassion to drive our decisions and our actions? Are we acting in the best interest of ourselves and of others? Right? And are we meeting each experience that we're having with a curiosity? Because that's a big deal, right? When we can meet the things that we feel are making us unhappy with curiosity, then we can start to ask ourselves, even though this is not a preferred experience here, right? Even though this is not something that I desire, even though this is something that is causing me difficulty, what can I learn from it? How can I grow through this experience? Because when we can be curious on that level, well then, again, there's nothing that can take away our happiness. There's nothing that can take away our fulfillment. There's nothing that can take away our sense of wellness. Does that mean that every single day is going to be, the best day ever? No, it doesn't mean that at all. And it means that, certainly it does not preclude difficulties in our lives. It does not, preclude uncomfortable experiences that we might have. But what it does is it allows us to be happy in spite of all of those things that might be going on, right? And so today I wanted to talk about where does well, let me start over. Last week I talked a lot about I started to talk about the default mode network, right? This really mysterious and very active circuitry of our brain, right? That when we're not busy doing something, when we're not paying attention to what we're doing, right? We're doing a mindless task or simply just chilling out, right? This part of our brain, this circuit in our brain that pushes us to think of ourselves in the sense of a self, right? But most specifically in the sense of a separate self, right? And of course, because of the negativity bias that we all carry with us, we start to think of the negative aspects of ourselves and the negative aspects of our sort of autobiography, all the different decisions that we made to get to this point, and it can get pretty disturbing at times, right? And so I want to talk a little bit more about this whole idea of self, right? And the idea of, the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of the self versus the ego, right? The difference between those two things. And then I want to talk about how the roles that we play in our lives deeply, deeply impact the level of stress that we experience, the level of unhappiness that we might feel, and the level of difficulty that we might experience in our lives, right? So first of all, the sense of separate self, right? Now, again, this is not something, when I start talking about this, I always feel like very woo-woo and spiritual, and it is a concept that has been talked about for thousands of years in spiritual and religious contexts, right? Like even the Bible says, love thy neighbor as thyself, right? Not love thy neighbor like thyself, but love thy neighbor as thyself, right? Because you and your neighbor are not separate, right? And that's going all the way back to the Bible, right? Now, of course, there's been plenty of philosophers and spiritual leaders or spiritual teachers, as well as authors and teachers. And, so many different people have talked about this in the centuries since the Bible was written, right? But even now, it's a very hard-nosed neuroscience concept, right? Like even scientists and biologists and physicists are talking about this concept of the connection that we all do have with one another. Right? It's not just this philosophical woo-woo, airy-fairy, hippy-dippy concept anymore, right? It is very, very much hard-nosed neuroscience, right? That there is this connection that we have to each other that is measurable, it is demonstrable, and it is real, right? There's an energetic connection that happens between us, right? So this sense that we have this separate self, right? Like, what is that, right? The separate self is what we might refer to as the ego. Right? Now, what's the difference between the ego and the self, right? I thought they were the same thing, right? And we all do, right? Because in a sense, when I say I am X, I am saying that my ego, right? I'm talking about my ego there, right? However, right, the ego, the difference between the ego and the true authentic self, as we might discuss it, right? The ego is sort of a picture that we present to the rest of the world, right? This is, my ego, right? I am Art Burns. I am 51 years old. I have long hair. I listen to this kind of music. I read these kind of books. I'm interested in these kind of activities. I drive this kind of car. I dress this style. I do this for a living. I am a father. I am a husband. I am a son. I am a brother. That's who I am. That is what I present to the world, right? That is my ego. But here's the thing. There is something inside of me that sees this ego, right? There's something about me, there's something inside of me, so there's something in my absolute essence that can form this ego, right? Like I can dress in a different kind of style, and then all of a sudden that ego is different, right? But who I really am is not determined by what I wear. It's not determined how I cut my hair. It's not determined about, any of those things that I listed, right? And so, and again, the way that we can see this authentic self as opposed to the egoic self that we present to the rest of the world, simple experiment, like asking yourself, who is thinking right now? Right? Because if you allow your thoughts to just happen, not that you're going to, specifically think about something, right? Intentionally, but just allow your thoughts to happen. You and I could sit here together, we could close our eyes, and we can watch these thoughts happen, right? We watch them pass through our mind as though they are on a movie screen, right? And a lot of times we feel like, okay, those thoughts are who I am, right? And because a lot of times those thoughts are going to be tied very much to the ego, right? The thoughts are going to be about, the interests that I have, the people that I love, the clothes that I'm wearing, the music I like to listen to, the books I like to read, right? But at the same time, who is it that's watching these thoughts go through? Who is it that's seeing that my ego is doing all of these things? Right? That's the difference between the ego, which we show to everyone in the world, and the authentic self, which is who we truly are, right? And it is that authentic self which is really connected to everyone else, right? The way I like to look at it is almost like an apple tree, right? An apple tree has many different fruits that it bears, right? So two apples off of the same apple tree are separate individual expressions of what the apple tree really is, right? But the apple tree as a whole thing and all of the apples that might be hanging off that tree are all connected in that one essence of an apple tree, right? So I can take one apple and I can think that this is just a single apple, right? This is completely separate from everything else, but it's not. It's part of that apple tree that grew all of those apples. And then for that matter, it's part of all apple trees. It's part of all plants. It's part of the earth. It's part of the universal flow, right? And so that's the way that we can think of ourselves as an authentic, limitless self, as opposed to the ego, which is the apple. The ego is the expression of who I am in this world, right? As an individual, right? And so that's how this kind of that's how that sort of dichotomy works. The separate self versus the egoic self versus the authentic self, right? And so when we talk about the egoic self, right, and this is where most of us live, right? This is where most of us are caught up in the egoic self all the time. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's what happens, right? And this is deeply tied into the roles that we play in our lives, right? So when we're, when the different roles that we have, right, are the things that kind of define us, but they don't define us on an authentic self level. They define us on an egoic self level, right? So for instance, again, my name is Art Burns, right? So that's the first identifying thing that I have. So everybody else in the world who's named Burns, right, has a certain connection to me, right? That's the sort of role that I am Art Burns. That's a role that I'm playing, right? The other role that I'm playing is as a 51-year-old white guy living in Denver, Colorado. Right? That's another role that I'm playing. I have this thing that I do for a living, right? I am a person who teaches people how to live in fulfillment and happiness after we reduce stress and we increase emotional intelligence, and we live in those qualities that I talked about in the beginning of this podcast, which is presence, acceptance, compassion, curiosity, and the like, right? I am also a father. I am also a brother. I am also a husband. I am also a son. I'm a cousin. I am someone who likes to smile. I am someone who who is I'm not really a fan of sports anymore, but back in the day I was. I was a Giants fan. Right? Like that's who I was, right? So that is my ego, right? Those are the roles that I'm playing in my life, right? Now, why is this important, right? Because it's in some cases, I mean, this, in a philosophical level, this is just stuff that we can think about, right? But how it relates to our day-to-day ability to be happy is what's important here to this podcast and this YouTube channel. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because that's what I want to try to help you to rise above the stress that comes from the roles we play, right? Now, how does this work, right? Like, what do you mean, Art? Like, how does stress come into the roles we play? Well, the roles that we play, especially when we're doing this without awareness, right? When we're doing this on an automatic, unconscious level, right? We all have the roles, right? Again, we're all mothers or fathers. We're all sons and daughters. We're all cousins. We're brothers. We're sisters. We're do this for a living. We drive this kind of car. We dress this kind of way. We listen to this kind of music, right? It's who we are. And again, on an egoic level, but it is important, right? Like, this is my expression of my self, right? Of how I see myself, that picture I'm putting out to the rest of the world, right? But if I do that without awareness, then oftentimes what can happen is I can get caught up in the pressures that come from these different roles, right? So for instance, I don't have many of these kind of implicit things, but I used to, right? So someone who had, my job before, right? Like someone who was, at one point I was in sales, right? So someone who's in sales, right, has to know about sports, right? Because in order to schmooze with clients, you have to be, able to schmooze with clients about sports, right? Of course, it's not real, but it's something that I believed at one point. Right? So therefore, I had to immerse myself into a world of sports, right? And understand what hockey team was doing well, what football team. I had to be conversant of this because I felt like this was part of the role that I was playing, right? And again, because it was unconscious, right? So therefore, I felt the need to be involved on this kind of level, right? But what happens is, right, sometimes those necessary parts of the role that we play, or the roles that we play in our lives, right, they're at odds with who we really are. They're at odds with that authentic self, right? So for instance, someone who was again, my role at one point in my life was a 25-year-old single professional in New York City, in the advertising business, in a sales capacity of the advertising business, who drove this kind of car, who wore these kind of clothes, and all this kind of stuff, right? So in that role, right, there was no room for compassion, right? If I was too nice to people, that was a drawback for me, right? That was not, and again, unconsciously, the feeling was that, it's a competitive field, right? So I can't be worried about what someone else is doing. I have to be worried about what I am doing. Right? I had to be, again, the role dictated that I needed to be selfish, that I needed to be protective of what is mine, right? Which is the antithesis of collaboration and compassion and kindness, right? There was very little room for that. Right? Like, so if there was another salesperson who was having a difficult time, for me to reach out and help that person meant for me to hurt my own success, right? Of course, this was not true, but this is what I believed at the time. So therefore, I ignored my compassion. I put my compassion in a closet somewhere, and I forgot about it, just like a bunch of old shoes that I no longer wear, right? Or a bunch of clothes that don't fit anymore, right? And the problem with that, right, is that once I kind of release that or ignore that ability to be compassionate, right? Now all of a sudden I am not who I really am, right? Because my true authentic self is very compassionate. So is yours, right? But when we deny these facets of ourselves in the interest of the roles that we're playing, well, then there's conflict. And then when there's conflict, there comes a level of fear. Right? There comes a level of fear. Like I have this feeling like I want to be compassionate, but but yet my egoic self is saying, well, no, you can't be compassionate because that's not who you are, right? Now there's conflict. There's a static there. There's a friction that's happening, right? And now that's going to manifest in some level of stress, in some level of unhappiness, in some level of suffering on some level, right? And this is all because, again, it's not the role itself that was the problem, right? It's not the fact that that's what I did for a living. And that's what I used to think it was, right? I used to think that, oh, I'm not happy because of this living that I have, right? But I have all this money, so I need to do it anyway, right? That's not what it was, though, right? What was making me unhappy was the fact that I was not aware of the role or the many roles that I was playing, right? And so when I kind of approach the roles in an unconscious level like that, that's when these conflicts arise, right? But if I was able to approach the roles in a conscious and aware level, well, then I can see that no, it's not true. Like, I can be compassionate towards others and still be a successful salesman, right? That is not a mutually independent concept, right? Not really. It is here, but it's not here, right? In my head, in my egoic mind, it is, but in my authentic self, it is not. In my heart, it is not, right? And so when we bring an awareness to this, right, and we realize that being a father, being a son, being a mother, a daughter, being a salesperson, being a grocery store manager, being someone who drives this kind of car and wears this kind of shoes and listens to this kind of music, right, when we can start to realize that these are all just simple roles that we're playing, when we can bring awareness to that and bring again a non-judging and compassionate awareness to that and accepting awareness, then we can start to challenge these concepts, right? We can say that, that just because this is my role doesn't mean that I can't dress this certain way, right? Like again, like if you think about like a corporate kind of situation, right? So what is a vice president? And I'm doing air quotes for all you on the podcast here, but what is a vice president of marketing wear to work every day, right? A lot of times we have this concept, right? Like, okay, well, that's somebody who has to wear a suit and a tie. I mean, I don't know if that's really maybe it's more of a finance person who would be more of a suit and tie kind of person. But the idea being that that's the assumption we make, right? But when we can bring awareness to it, right, we can challenge these things, and we can challenge them in creative and inventive ways, right? And we can say, well, maybe it's okay if I don't wear a suit and tie, I mean, it's not okay to wear jeans with holes in them, but it's also not necessarily a suit and tie kind of thing, right? So again, and this is just a very simple and silly kind of example, but the idea is that to challenge some of these concepts of these various roles that we play, right? And this is also where it ties back into compassion, right? Because when we can live with some compassion, and again, as I said in the beginning here, allow compassion to motivate us and to drive our decisions and our actions, right? When we can do that, we can recognize that the people who are having a hard time out there, right? The person who is treating us, in an uncomfortable or challenging way, right? The person who cuts us off on the road, or the person who, jumps in front of us in line, the person who we see kind of talking in a rude way to a server in a restaurant, or a barista at a Starbucks or something like that, right? We can recognize that this person is probably feeling a level of conflict between their authentic self and their egoic self, which is just wrapped up in all of these confusing roles that they're playing, right? And when we can see that with compassion and with curiosity, and with acceptance and with presence, then we can say, wow, I hope this person gets to bring some awareness to this trouble that they're having, because then they won't be so angry, they won't be so mean, they won't be so resentful, right? And that's why we talk so much about compassion. I know that's a real recurring theme in all of these podcasts and YouTube videos, but it's true, right? That's why I talk about it so much, because when we can feel compassion, compassion for ourselves and compassion for others, that's when we see that, the person who is expressing themselves is very likely expressing themselves from the level of the role, from the level of the egoic self. But that's not who they are. That's not who they are any more than it is who I am, right? The job that I do for a living, the way that I father my children, that is not who I am, right? I am so much more than that. Right? There is no way that any single role or any multiple roles could possibly capture the essence of my authentic self, nor could they encapsulate the essence of your authentic self, right? The authentic self is boundless. It's the culmination of again, it's like the apple tree that it's connected to everything, right? And so there's really, it's an awesome thing to think about, right? In a powerful sense, right? That there's just no limit to your authentic self, right? And as much as we feel that that's very unique, right? And it is, but, or I should say, as much as we feel like that's connected to everyone else, which it is also extremely unique, right? Like there is nobody else in the entire universe. There is nobody else who is just like you, right? There's nobody else who is just like me. There never will be, there never has been, and there is not right now, right? That everything that I express is coming through the very unique prism of who I am as an authentic self. But yet at the same time, I am connected to everyone else around me, right? Which is really fascinating stuff. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope that this comes in handy for you at some level. If you would like to talk more about this, I would love to explore it further. And again, a lot of times what we do is when we're feeling this stress and when we're feeling the emotions and the unregulated emotions that have us in a difficult spot, almost every time it's coming from acting and operating from a place of that egoic self, right? That thing that we're putting out there to the rest of the world. So the next time that you're feeling that way, right, when you're feeling tension and when you're feeling anxiety or depression or stress on whatever level, I invite you to come back into yourself, right? Watch your breathing, right? And just settle into your body and then ask yourself, right? Is this part, is this unhappiness that I'm feeling, is it related somehow to the roles that I'm playing? Is there some question I can be asking myself, some way in which I can creatively challenge the assumptions that I'm making about this role that I'm playing in my life? And oftentimes you're going to come up with answers, that are very much yes, that there is something that's there. And then we come back to those original concepts, right? Am I really attending to this present moment? Right? Because again, with the roles, most of the time we're outside of the present moment, right? We're worried about, okay, how is this going to be perceived by someone? What am I supposed to do because of this role that I play? How am I supposed to act? What am I supposed to say? How am I supposed to, I should be worried about what happens, right? Like that's all part of that role, right? And so, or many roles. And so when we can bring a presence, right, we realize that's all just constructs in our mind, and that's where the stress is coming from. So when we can be present and just realize that no matter what it is, all that stuff, right, that really I am just a person who is sitting here and I'm breathing, right? I am in my body. I feel myself here right now. I have a roof over my head. I have water. I have tea. I have food. I have whatever I need, right? I'm okay, in spite of any of those roles that are going on, right? And then when I can accept the fact that, yes, this role that I'm playing is being challenged, right? That's part of what's going on in my life right now. But I can accept it and take a deep breath and say, okay, if I can accept this, now what can I do to work with it, right? And I can lead myself with compassion, and I can lead myself with curiosity. If I can check in and correct one of those four things, then I can find the happiness. And then I can get back in touch with my authentic self. So I hope you found that helpful. And again, if you'd like to talk more, please hit me up, and I would love to talk more about it with you. All right? I hope you all have a great day, and I hope that you are able to find that happiness that is within you, that is part of your authentic self. It has nothing to do with the roles that you play. The roles that you play, the happiness is going to come and go, but the authentic self is where your happiness really is. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care.